Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a book review of the book Young Jedi Knights Return to Ord Mantell, the 12th book in the Young Jedi Knights series, but the first in a trilogy that wraps up the Young Jedi Knights series. So I've been reading through the Young Jedi Knights. I've had a blast doing it. I have them right here on my shelves. I've read the first 11 so far. You have 6 that form the first story, which is basically the story of the Shadow Academy, which I thought was a delightful storyline. And then you have 5 books which follow the Diversity Alliance storyline, which I thought, again, was a delightful storyline. And then you have this trilogy that was done at the end. 3 books at the end that was tacked on. And this is the first of them. And I'll be honest, I don't entirely know where Anderson and Maesta were going with this, but I'm enjoying the ride so far. I'll be honest, I thought that The Emperor's Plague was the perfect ending point for the Young Jedi Knights story. It wrapped up everything it needed to for the plot, and then for the characters, it brought forth a lot of the Jason and Tenel Ka, and Jaina and Zek, and Lobaka and his family. And they brought forth a lot of the character decisions, and a lot of the character moments had been neatly wrapped up. And so I liked where it was going. This, my apologies. This series, however, feels a little bit unnecessary in that we're already where we need to go for the future. This is just kind of, I think that they did this trilogy because the sales had been so good. They said, hey, you want to do another trilogy? And they said, sure. And then I'm assuming that the sales petered out a little bit. But the sales have been really good for a while, so because this is a very popular series. And this was a very hard series to find. I was lucky that I was at one of the local bookstores in Virginia when I lived there, and I went in, and they happened to have all 14 Young Jedi Knights books, all 14 of them, and so I just snatched them all up, and that was great. And so this first book is kind of a story in 2 parts. Like if this was a kids' TV show, the first one would be a 30-minute episode, the first half, and then the second half would be a 30-minute episode, and they'd technically be a 2-parter, but they'd have their own original storyline. So the first half of the book, the first part is mainly focused on the return to Ord Mantell. Han Solo returns to the twins at Yavin 4 and says, hey, I've been invited to be the Grand Marshal of the race at Ord Mantell. Do you guys want to come along? And so they all come along. And then, as you'd expect in a Star Wars book with Han Solo, hijinks ensue, and problems happen with the race. And so Han has to avoid bombs and mines, and has to figure out who laid them, and uncover the mystery and all that fun stuff. And so while they do that, they uncover this young woman, Anya Galandro, who apparently her dad was in the Brian Daley books, the Brian Daley Han Solo books, but Anya is out for revenge against Han Solo because apparently Han is responsible for her father's death. And she has access to a lightsaber, which is quite interesting. And Anya is the type of character that is very much in the 90s Star Wars. They wanted a solid, angry, muscular woman who was just a fighter, and she was determined, and she was she fits the mold of a lot of 90s Star Wars female characters, which was fine. There's some male characters like that, but they did a lot of female characters like this because they really wanted to emphasize strong female characters in the 90s, and so she kind of fits that mold. But Anya has this revenge storyline, and so the second half of the book is they go to Anya's homeworld called Anubis, which is, I can't say that word without thinking of the Egyptians, but they go to her homeworld of Anubis, and there's a civil war going on between the farmers and the miners. And I can't say that without thinking of the Oklahoma, oh, the farmer and the cowhand should be friends. Anyway, but the farmers and miners are at war, and so the Young Jedi Knights and Han Solo are trying to mediate the war and try to bring an end to this civil war that's been going on for like 30 years. So it's a story in 2 parts. I found the first part really fun and fast-paced and lighthearted, and the second part kind of dark and kind of serious and slower moving, but still an entertaining book nonetheless. There are some great themes in here about revenge and about whether you should do revenge or not. There are some great themes about fighting for what you believe in. There's some great themes about civil war and about people who profit off of war. There's some actually themes similar to The Last Jedi about war profiteers. Very similar to the point where I wonder if even Rian Johnson had read this book and got a little inspiration. So a lot of the ideas in this book I thought were really good. It's just weird that it was just so jarring that it had basically two parts. That it had the lighthearted romp and then it had the dark, serious storyline to tell. And a lot of people I saw online on Goodreads were complaining about the character of Anya and how she serves as a foil for Tenel Ka, and how we'd been building up the Jason character with Tenel Ka. And I get that because I, of course, as a kid, I loved Jason and Tenel Ka. I was shipping them, and I was a big fan of them. And I know where their story goes in the New Jedi Order and in the Fate of the Jedi, or not Fate of the Jedi, in the Legacy of the Force. So I know where their story was heading. So to me, this feels kind of like a side quest, and so it doesn't bother me quite as much. Now, I recently reviewed a canon novel where we had a similar thing where it seemed to be setting up a relationship between these characters, and then they did something else that was very frustrating. But at least we knew for sure in the EU where this was going, and also you can just tell by the way this story was told that it was more of a Jason just kind of has a flirtatious thing with Anya. Nothing actually develops between them because this is a kid's book, and so I think that's why it doesn't bother me quite as much because I know the end game. But I still really enjoyed this book. It's not the best new Young Jedi Knights book, but that's a high bar. But it's not the worst Young Jedi Knights book, and there's not that many bad New Jedi Knights books. There's really only one that's, I think, bad, and then the rest are really pretty good or even amazing. So I think this is a pretty good book. This is a very well done book. I'd give it like an 8 out of 10, maybe an 8.5 if I'm stretching it. But an 8 out of 10 feels pretty generous for this book. I really enjoyed it. I still wonder why this trilogy had to be done, but I'll see. I read the Cloud City book like 10 years ago, and I remember next to nothing about it. I only know one thing that Kevin Anderson mentioned in a podcast, and I was like, why'd you have to mention that? But I remember one thing about it, and then I did not read the third book, Crisis at Crystal Reef, which is the final Young Jedi Knights book, so I'm intrigued to read those and find out what happens to our characters. So overall, that's my review of Young Jedi Knights Return to Ord Mantell. If you've read this book, what were your thoughts on it? Did you love it or dislike it? Or did you find it mediocre? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.